Have you ever found yourself, swimming in this sea of information, feeling like you're just treading water without truly grasping the deep currents beneath? Today, you're getting a shortcut to some really profound insights as we take a deep dive into conversations that truly pull back the curtain on science, consciousness, and, well, the very fabric of reality itself.
Yeah, our mission on this deep dive is essentially to extract the most important nuggets of wisdom from a truly remarkable collection of discussions. This journey is drawn from the evolutionary mind, Trialogues at the Edge of the Unthinkable, a book featuring these fascinating dialogues of, well, a controversial biologist, Rupert Sheldrake,
Right.
a psychedelic explorer, Terence McKenna,
Mm-hmm.
and a chaos mathematician, Ralph Abraham.
And this isn't just about absorbing facts. It's really about being well-informed on some of the most surprising and, frankly, paradigm-shifting ideas shaping our understanding of the world. We'll explore why groundbreaking science might actually be hiding in plain sight, how our very perception of time and reality is profoundly shaped by something as fundamental as language.
That's a big one.
And even whether the entire cosmos is, in fact, alive and intelligent. It's an exploration of how these brilliant minds from wildly different fields find common ground and unexpected harmony at what they call the edge of the unthinkable. Okay, so let's kick things off by exploring this radical critique of how science is done today. And then there's this surprising proposal for its future that comes up.
Yeah, one striking aspect here is the idea that the increasing what they call professionalization and institutionalization of science, well, it might actually be holding it back from true breakthroughs. The authors of The Evolutionary Mind draw a really stark contrast between modern big science, the kind with massive particle accelerators, multi-billion-dollar genome projects.
Huge budgets.
Huge budgets. And they compare that to earlier historical periods. Consider Charles Darwin, for instance. His work on evolution completely transformed biology, right?
Absolutely fundamental.
But he never held an academic post. His groundbreaking research didn't come from some government-funded lab. It came from this vast network of knowledge he gathered from practical plant and animal breeders, animal trainers, pigeon fanciers, colonial administrators, just everyday experts in a way.
So it sounds like science used to be much more integrated with everyday life and observational practices rather than being sort of confined to ivory towers. What shifted?
Precisely. The concern raised in the book is that access to big money is coming to dominate the whole structure of science. And this has apparently led to a rather alarming situation where public esteem for science is declining, funding is being reduced, and morale among young people considering a career in science is falling. The golden age of ever-expanding science budgets in the 60s and 70s is over, they say. And that might be a permanent shift. In this context, the argument is made that holistic research, so studying whole systems, is actually much cheaper than reductionistic research.
Cheaper. How so?
Well, the more reductionist you get, right?
Yeah.
Seeking to understand the smallest possible things, the more expensive it becomes. To study the most evanescent nuclear particles, you need accelerators many miles long, costing billions of dollars.
Right. The smaller the particle, the bigger the machine.
It's ironic, isn't it? The smaller the thing, the bigger and costlier the apparatus needed to study it.
That critique of big science certainly sets the stage. But the authors don't just stop there. One of them offers this revolutionary vision for what science could be. What's this idea of grassroots science all about?
Well, this really begs the question, how exactly would this grassroots science work? And, is it a truly viable path forward? The core promise of this model is that interesting and important research projects can be done on very small budgets by students or by amateurs outside the framework of institutional science.
So taking it out of the labs, in a sense.
Exactly. A compelling example comes from Rupert Sheldrake's book, 7 Experiments That Could Change the World. He proposes simple yet profound experiments, some costing less than $50. Imagine research on how dogs or cats know when their owner is coming home, something many of us have experienced, right?
Oh, definitely. That feeling your pet just knows.
Right. The idea is to leverage existing amateur communities like pigeon fanciers. These groups already have self-financing journals and competitions, so one could pose wider scientific questions directly to them, like how do racing pigeons home?
Instead of just scientists asking scientists.
Precisely. This would engage a huge number of people in conducting real-world experiments, feeding results through existing magazines and networks, and fostering a broader scientific debate from the ground up.
And this approach isn't just limited to animal behavior. It extends to other fields too, like medicine, which obviously has its own massive cost challenges.
Absolutely. In medicine, where healthcare costs are just spiraling upwards, this model proposes systematic surveys. These can be done by students or local communities. Surveys on the effectiveness of holistic healing methods like meditation, acupuncture, or homeopathy.
Things often dismissed by mainstream medicine.
Often, yes.
Hmm.
The argument is that if we can rigorously test and then potentially encourage these cheaper alternative methods, it could lead to far more affordable and accessible healthcare for everyone. This isn't about entirely replacing big science, mind you.
Right, it's not either.
No, it's about reorienting parts of the system toward real practical problems that can be addressed at a local community level using far less capital.
So, if this vision of grassroots science takes hold, what are the broader implications for the established scientific community? It sounds like not everyone would be easily convinced.
Well, this discussion truly highlights the challenges of integrating new models with these deeply entrenched structures. Placing this within a larger context, it's really about shifting entrenched paradigms. One of the authors expresses considerable doubt about the scientific establishment readily accepting this new model.
Skepticism is understandable.
Yeah, suggesting it would require a totally exchanged population of new, young researchers to really gain traction. Another point of contention is the inherent limits of low-cost research. As one speaker points out, grassroots science cannot finance a super collider project or an expedition to Mars.
True. Can't build a particle accelerator in your garage.
Exactly, because science has not only moved from the easy problems to the hard problems, it's also moved from the cheap problems to the expensive problems. There's also the practical need for really large maps or computer graphic displays and data banks in national laboratories to synthesize the vast amounts of information gathered by amateur groups. And ironically, that's still expensive infrastructure.
So big science isn't going to vanish overnight, but it sounds like it's being urged to adapt, maybe become more porous.
That's a good way to put it. The consensus seems to be that big science is going to continue to exist, but it must economize, reorient itself toward real problems, and crucially, reintegrate with grassroots science. Why? Because the information on that level is needed, and let's face it, the budget pie for science is shrinking.
There's an economic reality driving this, too.
Definitely. There's a concern articulated that if science breaks the chain of expectations about delivering new technologies and consumer products, public interest and support might just dwindle, maybe to the level of interest in tournament chess, a niche thing. However, a surprising counterpoint is offered. The cost of supercomputing is spontaneously dropping. We're seeing personal supercomputers arriving on the desk.
Moore's Law in action.
Right. Even if this is driven by large corporate entities like Microsoft rather than two guys in a garage, this technological advancement could be the bridge. The bridge between grassroots data collection and big science's need for synthesis and massive processing power.
That's a fascinating point about technology being the bridge. And it also sounds like this new model could open the doors for other areas of research, areas that have historically been pushed to the side as less, quote-unquote, scientific.
Precisely. One of the major faults attributed to big science and its reductionist perspective is this gradual, progressive, never-ending elimination, trimming, pruning off of different things that are labeled pseudoscience, amateur science, fringe science.
Like what sort of things?
Think about fields like the paranormal, nutrition, all kinds of alternative medicine. These are areas largely rejected by the mainstream, even as the number of natural phenomena studied by big science keeps shrinking. The proposed new model, however, would open up cracks in the structure for the reintegration of all these different threads, fostering a more holistic approach to the field of knowledge.
So bringing things back together.
Yes. This would include fields like archaeology, history, and social science, aiming for a reintegration of the entire intellectual sphere, not just hard sciences.
And for this fundamental shift to truly take root, it sounds like education has a vital role to play, right? From universities down to high schools.
Absolutely crucial. The transformation really hinges on changes within educational institutions. The idea is to have departments of integration, interdisciplinary programs, and a holistic approach. This would prepare people for self-education and grassroots science. Students, they argue, are increasingly demanding more interesting, real-world problems to solve.
And if they don't get them?
They abandon science. So by revitalizing science curricula with a focus on grassroots research and real problems, universities could attract better students. It gives them a lifetime of research goals without needing huge grants or working for the military-industrial complex. It shifts the paradigm from just rote learning to active participation and inquiry. It reframes research as nothing less than participation in the evolution of life and the future of the planet.
Okay, so our deep dive now plunges from the structure of scientific inquiry into the very structure of the mind and reality, and often through lenses deemed, well, unthinkable by mainstream science.
Yeah, and what truly captures the imagination here is this bold assertion that psychedelics have had a significant, though largely unacknowledged, influence on scientific innovation.
Unacknowledged is the key word there.
Definitely. The surprising origin of this claim comes from an anecdote shared by Ralph Abraham. Apparently, a journalist was aiming to disprove Timothy Leary's controversial claim that psychedelics fueled the computer revolution. So she conducted a survey at SciGraph, the world's largest gathering of computer graphics professionals.
Okay, so a pretty specialized group.
Highly specialized. To her astonishment, out of 180 important professionals she interviewed, every single one answered yes to the question, do you take psychedelics, and is this important in your work?
Wow, every single one.
According to the anecdote, yes. It was a direct contradiction to her initial hypothesis and a powerful, if anecdotal, piece of evidence.
So it wasn't just Leary making a wild claim. There was actual unexpected validation from within the tech community itself. And Abraham himself had a personal experience with this, right? His background is in mathematics.
Indeed. Ralph Abraham shares his own deeply personal journey into this realm. His path began with LSD in 1967 while he was a mathematics professor at Princeton, followed by DMT in 1969. These experiences, he says, swerved his career toward a search for the connections between mathematics and the experience of the logos, or what Terence calls the transcendent other.
The logos, can you unpack that a bit?
He describes it as a hyperdimensional space full of meaning and wisdom and beauty, which feels more real than ordinary reality. A place they apparently return to many times for instruction and pleasure. So this personal revelation directly informed his professional pursuits, leading him to explore these profound connections between abstract mathematics and the felt experience of consciousness.
That's a fascinating connection, not just personal experience, but a new way of seeing and interacting with mathematical and visual information, moving beyond just numbers and equations.
And this begs the question, how can such profoundly subjective experiences be translated into objective, shareable knowledge? And what does this mean for the very definition of mathematics itself? Abraham was inspired by the work of Hans Jenny, who visualized vibrations in transparent media, basically making sound visible.
Cymatics, right.
Yes. So Abraham set out to build his own vibrating fluid machine to understand consciousness, communication, resonance, the emergence of form. This led to his development of cellular dynamata, or CD's computer graphics, designed to simulate mathematical models for neurophysiology and for vibrating fluids. These CDs became a unique way to model the brain, the mind, and the visionary experience itself.
And this wasn't just theoretical modeling. He actually saw his work manifest on one of the most powerful computers of its time. That must have been incredible.
Apparently it was. In 1989, Abraham had a fantastic experience at NASA Goddard Space Flight Center. He viewed his visual cortex model on the world's fastest supercomputer at the time, the Massively Parallel Processor, or MPP. He describes it as looking through the window at the future and seeing an excellent memory of a DMT vision.
A memory of a DMT vision simulated on a supercomputer.
Yes, not only displayed on the screen, but going about 100 times faster than a human experience. This was a pivotal moment, a direct visual correlation between a subjective psychedelic experience and a complex mathematical simulation. The subsequent redefinition of mathematics, as published in the American Mathematical Society's monthly notices, apparently redefined the entire field as the study of space-time patterns, explicitly dropping numbers and geometry as relics of history.
Wow, dropping numbers and geometry for mathematics.
As relics, yes. This rebirth of mathematics is seen as a direct outcome of both the computer revolution and the psychedelic revolution, which, the authors argue, took place concurrently and cooperatively in the 1960s. It shifted the focus from static numerical representation to dynamic visual exploration of patterns in time and space.
So if mathematics can be reborn through visual patterns, what does this imply for the very nature of perception and, maybe more importantly, the way we communicate about these complex, non-ordinary experiences?
Well, this truly highlights the profound challenge of translating subjective experience into shared understanding. Placing this within a larger context, it's really about the inherent limitations and maybe the untapped potential of language itself. Terence McKenna, another voice in these trialogues, believes the psychedelic state can be visualized with technologies ranging from paint and brush to supercomputers because it is not, in principle, mysterious.
So it's visualizable, communicable in some form.
He thinks so. But he clarifies that the emotional power comes not just from the visual input itself, but from the encounter with that input, the direct apprehension of its meaning. When they see compelling patterns, like the MPP data resembling a DMT trip, McKenna describes it as finding the footprint of meaning, an aesthetic order that suggests mind has somehow Dutched the stochastic processes of nature, implying an inherent intelligence in the universe.
But if these patterns are so clear and objective in a sense, why is it still so difficult to put the experience into words? That seems to be a common theme.
It is. Ralph Abraham laments that words fail me when trying to describe what he feels are universal psychedelic experiences. This leads him to advocate for an expansion of our visual linguistic capability into a universal language for space-time pattern.
A universal language, what would that look like?
He envisions a language where a single word or code could transmit a clear image of space-time pattern, along with whatever emotion we remember from the experience, thereby awakening those feelings in the listener. McKenna delves deeper, arguing that acoustically processed language, the small mouth noises we use to speak, became the willing servant of abstraction, detaching us from the here and now stuff of great density that visual language offers.
That's a profound thought, that our very spoken language might be abstracting us from a deeper, more immediate reality. It almost sounds like a critique of literacy itself.
It is, in a way. Rupert Sheldrake suggests that literacy, by training our brains to deal with linear print, effectively hijacked the visual cortex, thereby knocking out a large part of the visual processing capacity.
Hijack the visual cortex.
That's his term. McKenna, drawing on Marshall McLuhan, goes even further, arguing that literacy is finished as a dominant phase of human culture. He believes it's being replaced by a culture shaped by new forms of media where language is becoming flesh, making ideas visible, tangible. Though he does highlight the danger of television, viewing it as an addictive drug promoting passive consumption, which can actually prevent the development of visual intelligence despite training people to process images quickly. The goal isn't just faster processing, it's deeper comprehension.
Okay, and this leads us directly to fractals, which sound like they bridge this visual and abstract world, offering a new way to understand boundaries or perhaps the lack thereof.
Indeed. Ralph Abraham introduces fractals as demonstrating that natural boundaries, think of a sandy beach, a cloud, or even the Milky Way, are not straight lines or smooth curves. They're spatially chaotic and self-similar at different scales.
The classic fractal pattern.
Right. This teaches us fractal geometry and chaos theory. But then he applies this concept to psychology. He suggests that normal psyches have thick fractal boundaries between subpersonalities.
Thick fractal boundaries,
Meaning complex, permeable, allowing for healthy integration and flow between different aspects of the self rather than rigid separation. In contrast, he describes multiple personality dyschaos as resulting from pathologically low dimension or thickness boundaries like concrete walls within the psyche.
And this extends beyond the individual.
Yes, this model then extends to society at large, where rigid walls between cultures, nations, or even within our own minds create world problems.
So in this view, rigid boundaries are a kind of disease, preventing flow and integration, almost like blockages.
In Abraham's view, yes. The authors debate whether this fractal model supports a radical polytheism, many independent distinct parts, or a hierarchical unity. Abraham emphasizes that rigid boundaries are actually very unstable. He argues that increased permeability, meaning more crookedness, more fractal complexity, actually leads to a deeper unity, rather than simply having multiple isolated parts.
Interesting. More complexity leads to more unity.
That's the idea. This leads to the concept of dyschaos therapy, which aims to increase the fractal dimension of basin boundaries, basically make the boundaries more complex and permeable. Methods proposed include annealing, a process from neural nets, gently restructuring connections, living in different cultures to broaden perspective, or even navigating the complexities of personal relationships.
So real-life experiences can increase this fractal dimension.
Apparently so. He highlights psychodrama groups based on his work that aim to break down rigid boundaries, noting patient enthusiasm despite some therapists' initial concerns. He acknowledges psychedelics can also achieve this, but notes there's significant legal and social barriers. Abraham concludes that these rigid barriers are a kind of disease inherited from a culture which has the disease itself, and the cure involves becoming more of an expatriate of our own culture, or perhaps observing Aboriginal cultures where, he suggests, there are no boundaries to daily life, and communication is more fluid and less abstract, living more deeply in the present moment.
Okay, we've explored how technology and psychedelics might expand our perception. Now, let's turn to an enduring mystery in the natural world that really challenges our very understanding of consciousness and time itself.
Yeah, what's truly astonishing here is this century-old scientific puzzle of homing pigeons. Rupert Sheldrake details how extensive research has repeatedly failed to explain their abilities using any known scientific principles. These birds can consistently find their way home from hundreds of miles away, often in just a few hours. Competitive racing birds returning the same evening. It's incredible.
And science just can't explain it.
They've tried. Scientists have tried to explain this for over 100 years, and basically all the logical, mechanistic theories have been systematically disproven.
What kind of theories have they thrown at this problem, and why have they failed so spectacularly? It seems like something should work.
Well, they've systematically debunked every plausible mechanistic theory you could imagine. For instance, the idea that pigeons remember the outward journey. That was refuted by experiments where birds were driven by devious routes and rotating drums, or even anesthetized. They still flew straight home.
So not memory. What about senses? Smell.
Smell was disproven too. Pigeons home against wind, with blocked nostrils, severed olfactory nerves, or anesthetized nasal mucosa, still get home.
Okay, so not smell. Sun. Stars. A natural compass.
That was shown not to be essential either. Pigeons home on cloudy days and at night. While they can use the sun as a rough compass, it's not the main thing. They correct their course even if their internal time sense is shifted, which initially causes a 90-degree error, but they still get home.
So not by memory, not by sight via landmarks over long distances, not by smell, not primarily by sun stars. What else did they try? Magnetism. That's often brought up.
Right. Landmarks are impossible for homing hundreds of miles from previously visited territory, though they do use them when close to home. And this was tested quite dramatically with frosted glass contact lenses.
Frosted glass. So they were effectively blind.
Pretty much. And they still got within a few hundred yards of the loft. Then there's magnetism, often seen as the last remaining mechanistic theory. That fails too. Pigeons with magnets strapped to their wings or their heads, or even degaussed by being put in extremely strong magnetic fields, can still home. Initial positive results from the 1970s proved unrepeatable under more rigorous testing.
So even magnetism doesn't hold up. Hearing.
Finally, the idea that they can hear their home from hundreds of miles away also doesn't work, as deaf pigeons can still home. The core insight here is that traditional science, with its known principles, has completely failed to account for this phenomenon, often resorting to vague statements about subtle combinations of sensory modalities to kind of paper over the gaps.
So it's a genuine anomaly.
Sheldrake argues it is. And he points out that homing pigeons are just the tip of the iceberg. There are many other unexplained migratory behaviors in animals: cuckoos, monarch butterflies, salmon returning to spawn. He even suggests humans, especially nomadic people like Australian Aborigines, may have a directional sense, but it's least developed in modern urban people who are disconnected from natural cues.
If traditional science can't explain it with known principles, that leads us to a much more intriguing question. What kind of unknown sense or field could possibly explain these seemingly miraculous abilities? And what are the deeper implications for our understanding of consciousness and time?
This definitely opens the door to deeper speculation. Rupert Sheldrake proposes an unknown sense, force, or power, connecting the pigeons to their home. He describes it like an invisible elastic band.
An elastic band.
Yeah, stretched when the birds are taken away from their homes, pulling them back. He even suggests a converse experiment, where the mobile loft is moved instead of the pigeons. And apparently, he successfully trained pigeons to home to a mobile loft. They showed confusion initially, but adapted quickly. He mentions classified research by the Swiss Army using mobile lofts for similar purposes, suggesting a practical interest in this unexplained phenomenon.
Okay, so Sheldrake has the elastic band idea, and Ralph Abraham has his own take on this sixth sense, right? More like a beacon.
Yes, Ralph Abraham speculates that if a sixth sense exists, it might work more like a bat's sonar, allowing the pigeon to somehow see the room with its ears, consulting a very large three-dimensional map, and navigating by a beacon where home is supposed to be. He suggests this rubber band is more like a beacon that's part of a larger field rather than just a simple pole. He also raises the question of how information about a recently moved location would be inserted into this field, suggesting a dynamic, evolving connection.
But Terence McKenna takes this to an even more radical level. For him, it's not about an unknown sense at all, but a fundamental me-understanding of reality itself, particularly our perception of time.
Indeed, Terence McKenna argues the problem is not with the pigeon, but with the experimenter. He attributes it to the fallacy of misplaced concreteness, a term from the philosopher Whitehead, meaning treating an abstract concept as if it were a concrete reality. He believes biology is a chemical strategy for amplifying quantum mechanical indeterminacy into macrophysical systems.
Okay, amplifying quantum effects. How does that relate to the pigeon?
Well, for the pigeon, McKenna provocatively suggests a portion of the pigeon's mind is already home and never left home.
Part of its mind is already there.
That's his idea. He argues that human language poisoned us with the illusion of an unknown future, while for animals, the future is not unknowable. Their consciousness, he suggests, is a continual awareness extending from birth to death, experiencing time as one timeless moment.
Wow, so no past, present, future distinction in the way we experience it.
Perhaps not. And this makes their navigation utterly transparent and trivial because they are always seeing their goal, always connected to their destination in this timeless state. If we could step away from the linear, abstract framework of language, McKenna suggests, we'd fall into a timeless realm where all things are seen and the mystery of homing pigeons just disappears.
That's a mind-bending idea that our human perception of time might be a construct that actually limits our understanding of natural phenomena. What are the broader implications for other animals and even us when it comes to perceiving beyond our typical senses?
Well, placing this within a larger context, the mystery of animal homing opens up these profound questions about human consciousness and our connection to the world around us. Sheldrake's research on psychic pets further illustrates this. He's gathered hundreds of accounts of pets, knowing when their owners are coming home, often 10 minutes or more in advance, even when unexpected.
Right, the classic dog waiting at the door phenomenon.
Exactly, and their anticipation of owners going on holiday or to the vet. This is apparently a widely accepted item of common sense in Britain, even among skeptics, as one BBC panelist humorously noted. He cites examples of pets warning of air raids 10-20 minutes before sirens in WWII London, and even responding to supersonic V-2 rockets, suggesting remarkable precognitive powers.
Precognitive powers in pets. How does he explain that? And how does this connect to Sheldrake's concept of morphic fields, which we've touched on before?
Right. Sheldrake proposes that connections between pets and owners depend on a morphic field, similar to those he suggests exist around flocks or packs. This field is sustained by memory from the past and contains attractors, future possibilities that draw organisms toward future states. So the pet picks up this change in the field when the owner forms the intention to come home, almost sensing the future state of the owner being present.
So the intention itself creates a ripple in the field.
That seems to be the idea. Ralph Abraham connects this to morphic wavelets and fractal wave patterns, where vibrations like a historical event or an intention can resonate with a pet's mind wave, explaining specialized precognition. Sheldrake also suggests these bonds are comparable to social bonds that hold society together, citing examples of human premonitions, a mother knowing her child is ill from afar, or wolves knowing where injured packmates are without physically tracking them.
So our human disconnection from this field might be directly tied to our reliance on abstract language. That separation McKenna talked about.
Ralph Abraham posits exactly that humans are divorced from the significance of this field, and this disconnection contributes to societal disharmony and a sense of isolation. He argues that to submit to language is to lose our connection with the field, suggesting that nonverbal states like meditation and dreaming can help us reconnect. Terence McKenna connects this to shamanic magic, where shamans attain knowledge predicting weather, locating game by becoming like an animal, entering an atemporal or fourth-dimensional perceptual sphere. He points out the interesting Christian tradition's symbol of the Holy Spirit as the pigeon, or dove a messenger who can find out things in distant places and return, suggesting a deep, archaic connection between animal intuition and spiritual insight. It's almost as if some ancient wisdom recognized this inherent intuitive connection that modern human language has somehow suppressed.
We've just delved into the mysteries of animal perception and the nature of time. Now, let's broaden our scope to the grand sweep of evolution itself, both in the natural world and in the exploding realm of human culture and technology.
Yeah, what's fascinating here is how natural, isolated environments, like the Hawaiian Islands, serve as these living laboratories for evolution. They offer profound insights into how life adapts and diversifies. Terence McKenna describes Hawaii as a unique case of mid-oceanic volcanic islands. They're formed as a tectonic plate slides over a stationary hotspot beneath the Pacific floor.
Creating a chain of islands.
Exactly. A chain of islands of varying ages, with new islands constantly emerging as older ones are rafted away by the plate movement and eventually vanish back into the ocean.
And how does this unique geological process relate to the speed and intensity of evolution there? It's known for unique species, right?
It is. The islands are truly a laboratory for evolution and isolation, exhibiting incredibly high rates of endemism, meaning species found nowhere else on Earth. For example, a common wildflower from the Sierra Nevada is thought to have arrived as a single seed on Maui millions of years ago, and it gave rise to the bizarre and unique Hawaiian silver sword, a completely distinct genus.
Wow, from one seed.
From one seed, potentially. The authors note that life hopscotched from older, now-vanished islands to newer ones, with life still arriving on the Big Island from older islands in the chain. Additionally, lava flows create islands within islands. These micro-islands where species like the Hawaiian Drosophila, fruit flies with huge chromosomes, evolve independently due to isolation by toxic landscapes, even over remarkably short distances. This process of isolation, combined with genetic mixing when species encounter new environments, is a really powerful driver of speciation and rapid diversification.
It sounds like diversity itself isn't just a byproduct of evolution in these places, but almost an adaptive advantage in itself, like novelty helps you survive.
Exactly. The idea presented is that diversity itself is an adaptive advantage, particularly for prey species like butterflies. Novelty in patterns helps them evade predators who hunt by a consistent target image. Rupert Sheldrake suggests that morphic resonance, a concept we touched on earlier with pets, might allow habits to spread non-genetically and jump from place to place, augmenting natural selection even here. He notes Hawaii's exceptionally portable ecosystem, due to repeated lava flows, requiring entire ecosystems to essentially travel light and move as a whole unit to colonize new land. The discussion also touches on the debate about how species, whether through spores, mud on ducks' feet, or storm-blown birds, and even early Polynesians, perhaps observing bird migrations, first found and colonized these incredibly remote islands.
That's a rich understanding of biological evolution, but the conversation takes this fascinating turn when it draws parallels between biological evolution on an isolated island and the explosive growth of human consciousness and culture on, well, the World Wide Web.
Right, and this really prompts a crucial question. Is the World Wide Web, with its unprecedented connectivity and information flow, essentially a new kind of evolutionary environment? Maybe even a new sphere, as some suggest. Ralph Abraham describes the web as a new ground, a new world, a frontier land. He talks about it evolving through 4 different levels of citizenship.
4 levels.
Yeah, from basic email, level 1, it progresses to broad access to global information, level 2, then to interactive browsing of hypertext documents, level 3, and finally broadcasting your own material, level 4, giving anyone a potential global voice.
And Abraham seems almost awestruck by the sheer creativity emerging from this new frontier, this digital island chain, maybe?
He is absolutely captivated. He expresses awe at the absolutely unbridled, unrestricted creativity on the web. He talks about tens of thousands of people essentially devoting all of their waking hours to creative works for which there is no return except the joy of creativity. He calls it the miracle for which we've been waiting. He directly equates the web to Teilhard de Chardin's concept of the noosphere, literally the mind sphere, the collective layer of human thought, knowledge, and consciousness that overlays the planet.
So the web is the new sphere taking shape.
He proclaims the web is ushering in new genesis, the very birth and rapid growth of this global mind. He suggests it's a new, emergent phase of planetary evolution, where human consciousness is becoming interconnected on a truly grand scale.
So what are the profound implications for humanity's future here? Is this digital evolution truly leading to a better, more unified world, or is it more complicated?
Well, placing this within a larger context, the web's emergence is seen as this profound, perhaps even spiritual transformation, though definitely not without its complexities and debates among the authors. Terence McKenna embraces this vision with incredible fervor. He calls it the presence we've been waiting for, the outer shell of the omega point, a term for the ultimate point of cosmic evolution, and nothing less than a manifestation of the incorporeal body of God in human society.
Wow, that's quite a statement, the body of God.
It is. He sees it as potentially the end of history, dissolving boundaries between men and women, between society and nature, similar to effects he once sought through pharmacological means like psychedelics. McKenna even provocatively suggests the early web suffered from an absence of the feminine, and that men are now learning this trick of boundaryless, interconnected communication through technology.
And a key characteristic of this web, they note, is its invisibility and indestructibility. How does that play in?
Yes, McKenna highlights that the web is invisible and indestructible, originally designed by the American military to survive thermonuclear attack. This means it has no central control point to bomb or shut down. This makes it impossible for traditional powers to control. McKenna asserts that the key to the game is information and connectivity rather than land masses or physical resources.
But not everyone is completely sold on this utopian vision, right? Sheldrake has reservations.
Right. Rupert Sheldrake expresses what he calls British cynicism. He questions how this phenomenon fits into lives where people must make a living, seeing it perhaps as more of a hobby for many. He also questions the actual value of vast amounts of information when he, like many of us, already struggles to read and process what he already has access to. Information overload is real.
That's a very fair point. And McKenna, on the other hand, makes a somewhat controversial point about who this new tool is really for.
Indeed. McKenna controversially suggests the web is a tool for smart people, creating an elite of intelligence, which is utterly incomprehensible to nudniks, or those less inclined to engage with its complexities. He goes so far as to call it the equivalent of the hydrogen bomb for consciousness expansion.
An elite of intelligence. That's provocative. And Sheldrake sees a potential downside to all this connectivity: fragmentation.
Exactly. Sheldrake, observing this, notes the web's tendency towards incredible speciation of interest and endless proliferation or fragmentation into niche communities, everyone in their own little digital bubble. He questions where the unifying principle of humanity, Teilhard de Chardin's vision of the omega point, will come from if global capitalism hardly seems enough to bind these disparate interests together. McKenna counters that the internet is a superorganism that dissolves national boundaries and class controls, creating a holistic organism with an emergent telos of its own, a purpose which may supersede us.
Supersede us.
That's his suggestion. He envisions the web as a seed for the creation of a global telepathic collectivity, where future humans might interface directly with a collective mind through menus hanging in space when they close their eyes, blurring the lines between mind, machine, and shared reality in a way we can barely conceive of now.
Okay, we've journeyed through the realms of science, consciousness, digital evolution. Now we arrive at the most profound questions. The very nature of time, humanity's ultimate destiny, and the intelligence that might animate the cosmos itself. This is really the deep end.
It really is, and what's truly captivating here is how Terence McKenna challenges our conventional understanding of time, proposing this radical vision of history's culmination. He actually calls the Big Bang, the standard scientific theory of the universe's origin, science's free miracle.
A free miracle.
Yeah, a belief in creation from utter nothingness, seemingly out of nowhere. He contrasts this with his own view of a universe drawn not from an initial explosion, but towards a future point, a kind of cosmic attractor. He links his ideas to Teilhard de Chardin's omega point and sees humanity on a collision course due to planetary crisis epidemics, nuclear weapons, ozone depletion, overpopulation.
Sounds pretty bleak.
But he believes this confluence of crises is not an impending doom, but rather a birth. A difficult birth, maybe, but one built into the laws of physics. An inevitable evolutionary leap.
And this culmination point, which he calls the eschaton, sounds like it's defined by the dissolution of all boundaries. We heard that with the web, too.
Yes, the eschaton, from the Greek eschektos, meaning last things, is his neutral term for the final things, or last moment of history as we know it. For McKenna, it signifies a point where all boundaries are dissolving, between men and women, between society and nature, and ultimately the boundaries between life and death. He views life's entire history as a strategy for the conquest of dimensionality, starting with simple life conquering space, and culminating in humans beginning the conquest of time through memory, writing, and now vast databases that allow us to access and organize past information.
Conquering time, and the eschaton is the final step.
The eschatonic transition, he suggests, means the 3D world shrinks to the point where all points are cotangent, basically collapsing into itself and entering a non-metaphorical hyperspace. Time, he argues, is simultaneously speeding up, caught in the basin of attraction of a transcendental attractor, something like a black hole and time approaching a singularity where all linear progression collapses.
So what does this radically different view of time mean for our cultural narratives of the future, particularly that tension between visions of utopia and, well, dire predictions of apocalypse?
Yeah, this highlights a profound tension between humanity's aspirations for ideal societies and these prophetic visions of inevitable, dramatic ends. On one hand, you have utopianism, rooted in Thomas More's Utopia. It describes a dream of an ideal society, often with a triadic structure, a good past, a bad present, and a restored or enhanced future. Examples mentioned include scientific utopianism like Bacon's New Atlantis, the New Age movement, Rupert Sheldrake's ideas in The Rebirth of Nature, Ralph Abraham's chaos utopia, a new equilibrium after chaotic change, and even Terence McKenna's psychedelic utopia, envisioning an archaic revival through mass mushroom consumption, leading to a new state of human being.
Okay, so utopianism is about striving towards an ideal. How does that differ from millenarianism?
Millenarianism, on the other hand, is the apocalyptic idea that human history will end at a certain moment with the eschaton, culminating in a final moment of transformation. Terence McKenna, and others like Jose Arguelles, famously predicted the year 2012 based on McKenna's time wave model derived from the I Ching.
Right, 2012 was a big focus for a while.
It was. Sheldrake notes the conflict. Utopianism seeks to improve things incrementally, working towards a goal. Apocalyptic millenarianism sees decline as inevitable, leading to a total miraculous transformation, like the coming of the Messiah, or in McKenna's view, perhaps a collective DMT trip, a sudden shift in consciousness. McKenna argues that rationally, only utopia or more history seem like options, but both have historically failed as models for human progress. He points to American, Nazi, Soviet utopias as examples.
So the failure of rational options pushes him somewhere else.
Exactly. This pushes him towards what he calls the irrational choice of millenarianism. He believes if a real millennium doesn't occur, humanity will create a virtual eschaton so meticulously that it becomes an alternative reality, like the web becoming the omega point.
So McKenna's 2012 prediction was quite specific. What exactly did he foresee happening then, and how do his colleagues Abraham and Sheldrake respond to that kind of specific dating?
Well, McKenna's specific prediction of concrescence at the winter solstice of 2012 AD was based on these complex mathematical models of novelty entering history. He even speculated it might involve the invention of time travel, which would obviously render linear history meaningless. Ralph Abraham offers an alternative view. He argues the historical record supports more of a chaotic transient from one attractor to another. So not an absolute end, but a new equilibrium, a rapid change leading to a glorious new organization, a phase transition, not an apocalypse. McKenna, for his part, believed approaching the eschaton required psychedelic self-experimentation to essentially take a look at the eschaton and prepare emotionally and psychologically for the white-knuckle ride of accelerating change and dissolving boundaries, citing examples like the rapid dissolution of the Soviet Union and Yugoslavia as microcosms of this larger accelerating process.
That's a lot to process about time and history. But what are the implications for our place in the universe? Can we truly reconnect with the sense of the living cosmos, as some ancient traditions seem to?
This takes us to a truly profound question. How do we bridge the gap between modern scientific understanding and a more spiritual, perhaps animate view of the heavens and their potential intelligence? Rupert Sheldrake argues for recovering the pre-17th century understanding of heaven as both the physical sky and the abode of the divine, challenging the modern separation of astronomy from spiritual meaning.
So reuniting the sky with meaning.
Precisely. He proposes considering stars, galaxies, and solar systems as potentially having a life and intelligence of their own, maybe related to traditional concepts of angels or celestial beings. He connects DMT experiences, which often involve encounters with light and intelligence, to heavenly bliss, noting a profound experience of pattern, meaning, and intensity that feels more real than ordinary consciousness.
So this challenges the traditional Cartesian dualism of inner and outer mind and matter, that sharp separation.
Exactly. Sheldrake rejects that dualism. He suggests, when we look at the stars, in some sense our mind reaches out to touch them, and that heavenly states might be located at places other than inside our cerebral cortex. He laments that most modern people, even professional astronomers, are abysmally ignorant of the actual night sky, relying on books and computers rather than direct observation. He points to amateur astronomers as keeping this vital practice alive. Sheldrake believes a great move forward will happen when astronomy and astrology link up again.
Astronomy and astrology, that's controversial.
Highly. But he means integrating scientific data with meaning. For example, observing supernovas, astronomers study them meticulously, but without inherent meaning, while traditional astrologers largely ignored such transient events. He even suggests the sun's complex magnetic fields could be a physical basis for its own consciousness. He proposes celestial hierarchies could be reflected in the superclusters of galaxies, solar systems, suns, and planets, which were traditionally believed to be abodes of intelligent beings. He He also mentions Elizabethan star magic, where figures like John Dee attempted to contact extraterrestrial intelligences through rituals for guidance, suggesting an ancient tradition of interacting with cosmic intelligence.
And how would we make contact with this cosmic intelligence in our current era? Is it just about telescopes?
Ralph Abraham sees SETI, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence using radio telescopes, as too limited. He suggests journeys out of the body, whether induced by psychedelics or through other altered states, as a more direct means of meeting and being taught by extraterrestrial intelligences. He even describes his own rather unusual star magic experiments conducted in a hot tub, apparently conversing with constellations like the Zodiac and the Milky Way, finding they have a lot to say about the morphic field.
Conversing with constellations, okay. And McKenna.
McKenna, however, finds it hard to physically locate these entities or intelligences. He notes wryly, the only locators we've been able to find for these things are drugs. He hypothesizes that the imagination is the detection equipment for the morphogenetic field, acting as a universal library of what is real. Accessing the imagination, for him, is accessing this deeper field, which is inherently empowering.
So it sounds like there are different potential pathways to this kind of cosmic contact, both internal through consciousness and perhaps external through observation or even technology.
Sheldrake suggests three broad paths to what he calls ET contact. First, shamanic journeys to contact beings of a similar order to ourselves, often encountered in non-ordinary realities. Second, communicating with higher minds, intelligences associated with the sun, the galaxy itself, through prayer, mystical insight, or intuition, perhaps guided by traditional frameworks like hierarchies of angels or cosmic beings. And third, directed mind travel, guiding conscious efforts towards particular stars known for specific traditional qualities, like Regulus associated with royalty, suggesting a new frontier of space exploration that can be done on a very low budget, leveraging consciousness itself as the vehicle.
And how do these profound cosmic and temporal ideas integrate with the spiritual sense of ultimate unity, a sort of divine process unfolding through all this chaos and novelty?
This final thread beautifully brings together the scientific and the mystical, suggesting an evolving divine process at the heart of the universe. Rupert Sheldrake shares a critique from his teacher, the Benedictine monk Father Bede Griffiths. After reading their first book of Trialogues, Father Bede noted a lack of the sense of the mystical, of the unity which transcends all dualities.
A need for more integration at the highest level.
Yes. Father Bede suggested they integrate David Bohm's physics concept of an invisible, unmanifested source, the implicate order which evolves through feedback from the explicate manifested world. In this view, chaos is the original undifferentiated unity from which everything emerges.
So this transcendent unity is what McKenna refers to as the cosmic attractor, the omega point.
McKenna agrees, yes, this transcendent unity is indeed the cosmic attractor he speaks of. Abraham notes that their discussions, as captured in these trialogues, actually show decreasing dualism over time, leading towards an integration into a unity of all and everything. Sheldrake explains how evolutionary theory fundamentally transformed Christian theology. It shifted from a static or purely cyclical view to a process theology, influenced heavily by the philosopher A.N. Whitehead. In this view, God evolves along with the creation, and the evolutionary process is itself seen as a divine process. This means God's action in historical time is continuous, not just a one-time event at the beginning or interventions from outside. God as part of the process, not separate from it. Exactly. Ralph Abraham suggests calling the sensorium of God, this field of divine awareness, the logos, but expanding the term beyond just word or sound to encompass a full space-time continuum with all phenomena attached, including consciousness and morphogenetic fields, opening it up to all forms of being, not just lower-dimensional languages.
And this evolving process suggests a dynamic balance between some kind of destiny or pull towards the attractor and genuine freedom or choice along the way.
Absolutely. Abraham emphasizes that fractal bifurcation events in chaotic systems, those moments of choice or branching paths, create zones of indeterminacy. In these zones, the intervention of God or even of human will can affect history. And these moments aren't rare. They occur very frequently, even during a single day.
So constant opportunities to influence the outcome.
Yes. This liberates us from the simple notion of entelechy, which is a fixed destiny or a completely predetermined path. The idea is that the universe, much like a tree, comes to flower to maturity, fulfilling its potential, but with immense freedom in its evolution, full of these crucial choice points. While McKenna's time wave focuses primarily on human history as the measure of novelty, Sheldrake suggests broadening the perspective. Look at astronomical indicators like variations in sunspot cycles or the occurrence of supernovae for signs of novelty on a cosmological scale. This implies a cosmic time wave that extends far beyond human experience, encompassing the very dance of the stars and galaxies themselves.
What an extraordinary journey we've taken. Really, we've navigated across such diverse landscapes of thought, from fundamentally questioning the very foundation of scientific funding,
Right back at the beginning.
all the way to contemplating the possibility of a telepathic human future and the conscious nature of stars themselves.
Yeah, and placing this within a larger context, these trilogues are just such a powerful reminder that the evolutionary mind, the kind of mind they're exploring, is one that constantly seeks to expand its understanding. It seeks to dissolve rigid boundaries and reintegrate what has been artificially separated, whether that's science and spirituality, our inner and outer realities, or even our conventional notions of past, present, and future.
So what does this all mean for you listening right now? Maybe consider how you, in your own daily experience, might already be living at the edge of the unthinkable, where your personal perceptions, your technological tools, the patterns you notice in the world around you, where they might be hinting at a reality far more interconnected and, well, intelligent than you might have previously imagined.
It really raises an important question for you to ponder. What small experiments could you do? Not necessarily scientific ones, but maybe just observing the world with a renewed sense of curiosity, looking for those connections in your own life. What patterns are emerging for you?
We definitely invite you to continue your own deep dive and maybe let us know what unthinkable connections you're curious to explore next. There's certainly no shortage of them.